In today's video, we're going to be drawing Namazu, the giant Japanese catfish. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Daggett, this is Daggett Designs, and in today's video we are drawing Namazu. Now this one comes straight out of Japanese folklore. There was a belief that earthquakes were caused by a giant catfish named Namazu that would swim underneath the core of the earth and basically shift things around by flapping his tail around, and this is what would cause the earthquakes in Japan. Now, back when people believed in this sort of stuff, they were grateful that there was a deity. His name was Takamikazuchi, or I'm probably pronouncing that horribly wrong, but he was the god of thunder, and he would come down and basically tunnel through the earth, and he'd pin Namazu down with a big rock. He'd basically pin him down with a giant stone to prevent him from moving and causing more earthquakes. Although he could still cause earthquakes, it was thought that the destruction would be diminished a little bit because of the heavy rock placed upon his head. With that having been said, let's get straight into today's video by going to the overhead. Alright everyone, welcome back to the table. So, this is going to be actually quite a small design. We're just going to use an A4 sheet of sketch paper, a mechanical pencil to sketch our design out, and I've got an eraser in case we should need it. Now this is a smaller design like I said, and it's certainly not anywhere near as popular as, say, koi fish or dragons or something like that, maybe oni. However, it is one of my favorite characters from Japanese folklore. I think it's one of the sort of cuter characters, depending on how it's depicted, and I'll put a couple of examples up on the screen right now, because there's two different styles that I've seen these done in. One of them is a more cutesy sort of style, which, you know, I like. I think it looks nice, and it's really simple and bold. That's sort of what I appreciate about it. And then there's this sort of more detailed and more grotesque looking style, which looks a little bit more realistic, falls more into a neo-traditional category, and that sort of thing. So I sort of like both of them, and I'll try and do something that's a little bit in between the two of them. So starting out with your sketch paper, we're going to start just mapping out a shape for our fish where we want everything to sit. So I'll probably start with like a little semicircle sort of shape, maybe like this. That'll give us a placement for our head. You know, now part of this is going to be quite similar to drawing koi fish. We're still drawing a fish, so the basic layout's going to be quite similar in a lot of ways. I'm going to drop a curved center line on this, so just coming from the middle like that. And I'll go across the top with a long stretch line. It's not going to be so curved like if we were drawing a koi fish. The catfish here has quite a flat head, so its eyes are actually going to be closer to the top rather than the sides. Now I do want to split this front section up into the mouth, because we're going to have a forward facing mouth on this guy. So I'm pretty much just going to draw a second line in above our bottom like that, just help split that up. And then just above this I want to put in a couple of spots for nostrils, for whiskers. So just a couple of small circles on either side of our center line for our whiskers. And you can come up to where your center line is. You're going to come probably closer to the top half on this side and just drop in a circle shape for your eye, like this. And you can double up on that outside line for the eyebrow ridge sort of part of it, like this. And on the other side, you're going to do the same thing, just bringing in a circle for the other eye, like this. Now this is just the basic layout and construction for our head. Now to start putting in the body structure a little bit, I'll bring a line that comes up and out slightly. So we've got, dips in slightly at the base of the neck there and then comes back out. And I'll just loop that around for now. I'll bring a line from the bottom that comes out and around. I'm going to have a bit of a turn in the body here. So at this point, I'm just going to dip in slightly and come back out. And we're going to loop that all the way around, probably come out a little bit more like this, and come back into our body. So that's going to be our general body shape. And it's going to have this like little twist in the center of it. Now for drawing in the main structure for our fins, I'll come down to this sort of front area down here. And normally we do like a triangle shape. In this case, I'm going to do maybe a bit more of like a rectangular sort of shape. So it's still going to have rounded corners and that. it's just going to be a little bit more boxy, you know, a little bit less sharp and angular and a little bit more boxy. We can do maybe a slightly more triangular shape on the other side because we've got less of that fin visible. And we'll come up to this back corner as well. You're going to have 4 fins. There's 2 main fins and the 2 sort of underside of the body fins. So we've got this one at the back as well. Another little boxy shape for that one. The other one's not going to be visible. That'll be underneath our body. To draw in the dorsal fin portion of this, I'm going to come to this line at the back here. Come forward off it like this. Cut straight across the top part of the body there. And then you can loop that back down to the base there. And then to link it up, you're just going to follow this line up and join it up to there, to that largest part of your curve there. Okay, once you've done this, you can put in the line for your tail. We're just going to drop in a simple construction line for now. So coming from this top edge, and we'll come out like this. You want it to come out quite far from there. Loop back around and just follow the shape of your body back a little bit like this. So from here, we're going to look at adding some of our details. So we'll start with our eyes. I'll just strengthen up the circles that we drew. I want the eyes to be nice and big on this guy. And I'll add a pupil looking off in that direction. And then I'll add an outer ring to that with a little space for a highlight. And then all the space around that will just be white. So that's sort of like the iris and the pupil there. And you can split that larger circle off into 2 rings towards the back there as well. And you're going to do the same thing for both of your eyes here. Now once you've done both of the eyes, I like to just come around and strengthen up this line at the back of the eye here, that little bulge. And to add that to the other side of the head, you can pretty much come out from where the eye is with a bit of a bulge like that. That'd indicate this sort of, I guess, lump here, the lump in the flesh there. And then you can just come back into the rest of the head. So you have that little lump above the eye, which can also protrude a little bit on the bottom side of the eye. Now before we start drawing our mouth in, I'm going to drop in some whiskers. So you're basically just doing 2 long curved lines that taper down to meet each other. So we'll bring a line out like that, and you want to have a bit of waviness to it. And then double up on it, starting off a little bit wider, trying to keep the thickness consistent. You're going to try and keep them parallel all the way along, so you get this nice taper off to a nice thin whisker. And I'll add another one to this side here. You can sort of make these as long or as short as you would like. It depends on your design. But try to keep the lines parallel and keep thickness and length consistent with the other whiskers. Now from here we can put in the top lip section for our catfish here. So I like to just bring a line. You can either do a smooth line across the top, or you can bring in a little bit of texture. I like to just bring in a couple of curves to the center like this, and then bring that back along the face. You can bring in a little bit of texture and loop that line around towards the back like that. And for the other side, you can just bring that up to the other side of the face because it'll cut off at that point. Now from here, you can slightly double up on that line, and that's going to give you an actual top lip portion. And just above that, near the center line here, if you'd like to, you can put in a couple of small dimple areas just for nostrils. Now just above the nostrils here, I also like to add these little peaks, which just indicate some really small underdeveloped whiskers as well. And now drawing in the shape for our bottom jaw, you're pretty much going to follow that line that we drew around the bottom here. Just following that around to create the open mouth there. And on the inside of that, if you'd like to, you can add some teeth. Now sometimes they're done as little bumps or little sharp teeth. I kind of like the sharp teeth, so I like to just add in random teeth, you know, keeping it top and bottom, just playing around with different size teeth in that. So you can drop in a whole bunch of little peaks if you'd like for your teeth. And then to actually fatten out that bottom lip a little bit, you can just double up on your line like this. Bring that right around. And as you get to this point, I like to dip in, dip back out to give it a little bit of a jaw. And then flick that back up and into the head like that. Now it's at this point you want to add the bottom of the jaw whiskers, because there's whiskers coming out from underneath the bottom of our jaw here. So you can add them in. I like to do these ones a little bit smaller and possibly a little bit fatter or a little bit wider. So you can play around with that and just get them how you'd like them to be. Now, how do we join the head into the body? So I come down to this part of the jaw, and I'm going to start from underneath our little curved up line that we did there. Starting underneath it, coming out with a little wavy W curve. And then you can bring that up and over the spot where your fin starts to come out of to connect into the head there. And then coming up just behind our eye here on a slight angle like this, I like to just drop in the gills. So just wavy lines for my gills. And I like to make them smaller as I go along. Now to add detail to your fins. This is basically a similar process to how we draw koi fish fins or pretty much any type of fish fin, but I'm going to come out, adding a few curves to the end of my fins for texture. And if you want to, you can add a few little peaks in there as well to make it look maybe a little bit torn or damaged from the weather. Especially that this thing does swim around and cause earthquakes, there'd probably be a little bit of damage on his fins. And then you can draw little curved lines going in towards center from the outside of the fin that will create that streaky look that they have. And then I like to pack some spots in there as well, just like this, which is just a little bit of pattern stuff. Now you're basically going to repeat this same method for drawing in the fins for all of your other fins. Just dropping in your curves at the top of the fin and then adding in your lines and spots. For this top line on the body, I like to bring it up, flick off towards the center of our body there. And then I like to bring the line around basically like this. So we've got this smooth line here, but I like to just come out and flick up. From underneath that, flick up, and then join that into the rest of the tail. This gives it a little bit of like a bunched up, fleshy look at the bottom there. And you can add little loops to the end of those lines as well. Now for doing this part, which is your dorsal fin, you're basically going to do the same thing as your other fins, bringing it up, adding in a texture towards the top of the fin, like this. And I like to just drop it down and curve around for the bottom of it. And then you can add your little lines and details in. Now for the tail portion that's at the back of the body, we're going to add like a waviness to the line. And this can take a few tries to sort of make it look how you want it to. But there's like a waviness to the line like this. If we erase the inner line, like our sketch line there, you'll see the basic shape for our tail is just like this wavy pattern. And then you can work on correcting parts of it if you don't like it. Like this back part, I'd like to make that just a little bit smoother. So I have these waves here. I think I'm going to just cut that off a little bit and bring it straight back down into here. Like this. Now from here, if you'd like to, you can go ahead and add in some of your details. So just adding in a few little nicks to make the tail look a little bit battle worn. Like this. And then you can go ahead and in like a wide fashion, a circular fashion, you can go ahead and add in all of your small lines like this. And I like to vary the length of these lines a little bit too, so they're not all the same length. And I just come around as I do it. Now, if you are only drawing the catfish portion of this, that would be finished. You can go ahead and transfer that to some watercolor paper and get it painted up, or scan it into your iPad and color it in digitally. That is basically it for drawing a simple Japanese style catfish. The elements that make this a little bit more neo-traditional is just adding in some of those little textures on the fins, and you know, those little bits of extra detail that make it a little bit more realistic, not too much. However, normally when I've seen this drawn as a tattoo illustration, he's normally depicted with either a large stone on his back, or to make things a little more aesthetically pleasing, they usually draw a gourd, one of those wine flasks, basically sitting on his back to hold him down. In this case, I thought we'd do something just a little bit different and you know, a little bit fun, and I'll draw some bells on his back. So I'm actually going to introduce our circles tool here, and I'm going to go ahead and use a size like this here, I think, and drop in a couple of circles, and these will be basically where our bells will sit, and then we can play around with adding detail to this. You can tie pretty much anything you want to the back of your catfish here, so play around with different ideas. If you want to add maybe a Hanya mask to the back of him, you can do that. I've seen it done before and it looks quite nice. There's a whole range of different design elements you can add to these, and you know, they all look quite interesting and different, so that you can create more unique artwork. Alright, so I've dropped in a couple of my circles here. I'm going to make them into bells from here. So we're going to start by cutting off the top portion of it with a curved line that wraps around our circle shape here. It's going to wrap around it as though it's a sphere. You can double up on that line, basically creating a lip in the center of your bell. Like this. Now the top part is going to be left as is, so you can just create a bit of a solid line at the top there. And for the bottom, I'm going to draw a cross shape. So just coming down like this, and across like this. And at the end of each of those crosses, you can thicken up your line to a small circle and slowly taper that down into your line. Now when you outline this, it will look like the little holes at the end of these little circle bells. And now you can make that line at the bottom solid. Now you can do the same thing to your other circle here. I'm going to do it on a slight different angle. So just bringing that line up and around, adding in the second lip to it, and then drawing in my cross where I would like it to sit. I'll bring this one across the front like that, and I guess the other one will sit more off to the side like this. Now, like I said, you could of course replace your bells with anything you'd like: a skull, a Hanya mask, a large stone like the original story, or maybe a gourd or something like that, like how it's normally depicted. Now from here I'm going to draw the ropes that are binding our bells to the body. So to start with, I'm just going to start with like a fake knot in the middle here. So I'll just bring a little loop like this, and then another one behind it. So it looks like there's something that's been tied off. And I'll do some little diagonal lines across it that are going to look like the fibers of our rope there. We can bring one side of the rope down to the front portion of the body here. Now you want to keep your thickness nice and consistent, so make sure this is as thick as those two little loops that you did. And you can add your little diagonal lines across it for your rope section there. I'll come in from the other side at the top here, bringing in my rope, making sure this size is consistent again. And then I'll wrap down and around the back side of this fin, just from the center, making sure my width is consistent again. And the last bit can just come out from the top here, wrapping around this back portion of the body. Now that we've drawn in the cross body ropes, we can go ahead and just draw in a couple of loops. These are nice and simple. You basically drop in a loop at the top like this, or a little oval sort of shape. And then you can bring a double line out like this. I like to make it get thinner around the point where it curves. Then come out from behind that line and drop it back in. And then you can add your little diagonal lines to this. And that's going to give it that rope appearance. And we'll do the same thing over on this side here. So I'll bring the loop out maybe to about there, like that. To clarify things a bit, I'll just erase what's inside of it. We can always add those parts back in, and then come out with my rope, following my curve around, and back in. And then I just add my little curves on the inside of my lines. Okay, so from here, I'm going to transfer this over to some watercolor paper using my light pad and a couple of fine liners, and then we can jump into painting our catfish. Okay, the line work for this one is complete, and I will take a quick moment to mention that the sketch for this one is in the class notes folder of your YouTube membership if you are a member, and if you're not, please consider joining my membership program as it really helps support the channel. Now, getting on to painting this one, I'm going to run you through my supplies here. So going through my palette, I've got carbon black. These are Liquitex acrylic inks, by the way. I've got carbon black. I've got a dirty green, which is basically a mix of our yellow orange azo, a drop of dioxazine purple, and a couple of drops of sap green. This is our yellow orange azo, or I like to call it golden yellow. This is Pyrrole Red, and I've also got some transparent raw umber. So as you can see, they're all dark, sort of earthy tones, with the exception of the yellow and red, which are still sort of earthy, warm tones. And that's how we're going to go ahead and paint this one. In terms of my brushes, I've got a few different sizes here. I've got a number 6, a number 5, and a number 1. These are all Taklon synthetic watercolor brushes, and I've got a glass of water to wash my brushes out and to help with blending. Now, in terms of painting this guy, there's going to be a lot of black shading in this one. He's primarily going to be black, especially the top portion of his body. So I'll start off with my carbon black, and I'll load my brush up really heavily because we're going to do quite a large area. And I'll start off with just the top part of this head here, this section here. So coming in just above the eyebrow here. And I'm going to leave a little white streak along the top portion of the head there. And then I'll move back up towards the rope and our bell, just being careful and making sure to avoid my details there. So just being careful and working that ink across the page nice and slowly, like this. And don't worry about your edges being too rough, because we want a rough textured appearance. There's like a pattern work that's on top of our catfish here, and so it's going to have this rough sort of appearance to it, so don't worry too much about getting a nice smooth edge on your black. Okay, now once you've done that, you can go ahead and just rough out a few more bits of pattern if you'd like. If you're not happy with the shape, you can go around and play with the edges a little bit just to add, you know, a little bit more variety to your pattern. I think that's good. And then we can take our blending brush and just soften out some of those edges of our pattern there. Just soften them out to a grey. Just by gently feathering them out using a bit of water, we can soften them back. This just makes the transition from black to our next color a little bit smoother. We're not going for a super smooth blend here. Like I said, this is like a rough pattern on the back there, and it should be very splotchy and uneven, so you don't want this to be super smooth or, you know, a nice smooth blend or anything like that. From here, if you'd like to, you can go ahead on adding some little splotches and patterns underneath that. I don't like to plan these out. I like them to look natural, so I tend to just rough these in with a brush as I go. Now, this can lead to mistakes, and occasionally it does, where I'm not happy with a certain splotch, but we're not too worried here. That's art, you know. We're not about being perfect when you do these illustrations. It's about being creative and expressive. I'm going to come in just above the eye, leaving a little white gap around the top ridge of our eye there, just to create a bit of separation between our colors. And I'll add solid black above my eye itself. And then coming down, I just want to blend that through a little bit around the edge here, just to bring that grey down onto the face a little bit more. And you can do the same thing for the other eye, so just coming in with black above the other eye on that little eyebrow ridge sort of section, doing your best to avoid going too close to that line. And then bringing that black forward. And then gently just feathering it out and blending the grey out into the rest of the face there. We're going to start with this left side here, and we're pretty much doing the same thing we did for the top of the head, and that's leaving that little white strip along the edge there. This will just help break things up a little bit, and then you can bring your black straight across to where your bells sit. And you'll essentially repeat that same step for these next two sections that are inside the rope and the loop. I'm going to turn my page just to give me a little bit better of an angle so I can leave that white strip and then paint just in between my ropes, being nice and careful. Now to continue up this length of the body here on this side, you can bring some of your black out to try and sort of blend in that pattern from the other side of the rope there. And just bring that up and around. And you want to see a little bit more of the bottom side of the body on this side here now, because that's going to close off pretty shortly. So just feathering that out. So that we get that splotchy sort of effect. You just want it to have a little bit of a haze to it, I guess. You can add in some little spots as well if you'd like. And now from here, coming up to behind the rope and the bell up here, the top of the back portion, maintaining that patterned edge for a little bit, and then it's going to disappear off at the top there. And then just work on feathering out those edges a little bit to add that little bit of haziness to the edge of our color. And you can add your spots in from here. For that inner loop of the rope there, that's going to be solid black as well. So just bringing solid black to the inside of that. So we're going to start to leave a little bit of a gap along the top of our body there, coming up to our fin, our dorsal fin. Just to help separate our black from the line work along the edge there. And then we can pretty much bring solid black down and around our dorsal fin and around our rope. Now once you reach the other side of your fin, we're going to work on getting this belly portion. So you're basically going to start a little bit of your pattern work now, just coming in from this side. So just taking your black and working in a little bit of a rough texture or a rough pattern to this side, all the way down to the back of the tail. And then you can just fill in the section that's behind that, being careful working around your fin and just filling that section in behind it, solid carbon black. Now once you've done this, you can go ahead and feather out the edges of your pattern there, the same way you've been doing this whole time, to help fade it out and give it a little bit more of a warm look. Just blending out the greys in and around that pattern. Now the only other portion of this design that I'd like to black shade is the whiskers, the two top whiskers. So I'm just going to come into those with my brush, and you want to be really careful here because obviously you're working with really thin tapering lines. But just going in with solid black for your whiskers here. You could add little highlights or something, maybe a skin break on them or something if you'd like to. But I'll just do them solid black in this case. And as I start to reach back to the face here, I just want to take my blending brush and blend the end of that whisker back out onto the face into grey again. Now that's it for the black shading, so we're going to go ahead and start working with some of the other colors that we've got now. I'm going to go into this green that we made up. So it's a real dirty, muddy green that like I said, I made using Dark Purple and some yellow orange azo, along with some sap green. And it gives us a real muddy, sort of dirty color that I kind of want to use to blend in with my black, just around the edges. And this will give it like a muddy look. So just coming in around the edges of my pattern work there. And then taking my blending brush and feathering out some of that green color around the edges of my pattern. And you can just help blend them back into the black as well there, so it doesn't look too patchy. And this is supposed to be a subtle color, like we're not going for really harsh blending or color here. You're just going for a real subtle look to it. So bringing that green around, just following the pattern shape of my black, and then blending it out along the gray areas of my pattern work. Now, while I do this, I will just quickly mention that the green color that we're using, it's certainly not completely necessary. I would say most of the Namazu designs or Catfish designs that I've seen don't use a green color. They just use black at the top of the body. I just wanted to add a little bit more variety to it, and I saw one that used sort of a green tone in my reference images, and I really liked the way that looked. I just thought it gave it a little bit more color and a little bit more of a muddy, dirty look. And like I said, it's quite subtle. You're not bringing it right down to the edge. You're not doing any crazy blends with it. You're just lining the very edge of your pattern work along the edges with this green, and then trying to softly blend it down a little bit. And I just think it gives it a nice look. You don't have to do it. You could just do the black shading and, you know, call that finished the way that it is. Now I've finished my green and I'm just washing out my brush here. And we're gonna go ahead and dive into our transparent raw umber color. And we're using that for a little bit of the belly, but mostly the fins. It's like a sort of a brown sort of color. Now I'm going to come in from the outside of the fins, the very edges of them, with a little bit of my transparent raw umber. I don't want to overdo it. I just want a little bit on the very edge. And then I'll work on feathering that out and blending it through to white. Again, this is a brown sort of earthy tone that gives it that sort of muddy look. And I only want it on the very edges of our fins. And I just want to blend that through to a white, or basically blending it through to the paper. I'm just going to work down and around the mouth a little bit. There's a few areas here that I'd like to use a bit of my raw umber on. There's this area of belly just underneath our gills. You can use a little bit of that color. And you could also go in just underneath the mouth if you wanted to. So I like to leave the belly of these guys primarily white. However, if you'd like to, you can just go in from the very edges with a little bit of your brown. And this will help give it a slightly different tone. And just make it like a dirty white, like an off-white sort of color. I like to go in with a little bit of my transparent raw umber there. Okay, moving up to our tail here with our transparent raw umber. I'm going to just bring it the same way I did the rest of it, just along the edges, like I did with the fins. But you want to get a little bit more color towards the end of your tail here. Once I get to about halfway, I'll work on blending that back. Now the reason I only went halfway is because I could tell that the ink was starting to dry, meaning that blending it wouldn't work so well. So you have to be conscious of that too when you're painting, is you know, make sure you've got enough ink on the page. If you don't, you can always add more, but just be aware of your drying times. This will make sure that your blends are nice and smooth and that they are consistent. Feathering that out and gently blending that back towards the body. Once you're happy with your raw umber, you can wash your brush out, and then we're now going to go into our yellow-orange azo. Now we're going to do that in two parts. The first part is going to be the eyes. So just coming in around the iris section. And I'm leaving a little bit of a highlight around the back of the eyes there. That's optional, you don't have to do it. Depends how you want your character to look. I'm just leaving a little bit of a highlight around the back. And then from there, we're coming in to paint our bells using this same color. So you can leave a little bit of a white strip wherever you want there to be a highlight on your bells. If you wanted to, you could add some black shading or some gray shading to your bells. Really depends. It's up to you. It's a bit of a personal preference thing. I think in terms of this one, I'll keep them pretty simple. Can add a few streaks of white along the edges of your bells for highlight. Other than that, I'm just going to do these guys solid yellow. Just keep it nice and simple. Once you've done your bells and your eyes, you can wash out your brush. And we're now going into our last color, which is Pyrrole Red. And we're using that for a few different sections here. The first area is the inside of the mouth here, but I might do the back of the eyes first. There's that little strip along the back of the eyes. After doing that little strip there, I can come in to do the inside of the mouth, being really careful to avoid my teeth, just leaving them white and working around them. Now initially I was going to use the number 1 brush for this because it's my smallest brush size that I've got here at the moment, but turns out I could do it with the number 5. So working in between those teeth nice and carefully with your brush. And then we're also using red for our rope color. Not doing any specific highlights. We're just going to do solid Pyrrole Red over the top of our lines to color in our ropes. If you wanted to, you could get fancy with your highlights and shadows and play around with different things for your ropes here. But I just want to keep them nice and simple. We've got quite a bit going on with the rest of the image. I think it would be a good idea to keep these nice and simple. And, you know, give them a little bit more of a traditional appearance by not adding too many shades of different reds and stuff to it. Just keeping it nice and bold and basic. And that, my friends, is how we draw Namazu, the giant catfish that causes earthquakes throughout Japan. I really hope you enjoyed this one, guys. That's it for today's video. You'll have to leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought of today's video and what you thought of this design if you're going to give it a go. And make sure to head over to Instagram at Daggett Designs and tag me in your drawings. I really like seeing your artwork, so feel free to ask any questions or tag me in your drawings. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Alright, bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.